on this white, snowy and cold morning, a very warm welcome to all of you. Warm welcome to the second British-Polish Chamber of Commerce Female Leadership Forum. My name is Olga Grygies-Sydens and I'm a former CEO of PwC in Central and Eastern Europe. And having retired from the firm, I now serve on various non-executive boards. I also act as an advisor and mentor to a number of senior business leaders. And it is my enormous pleasure and privilege to moderate today's discussion. And before we kick off, let me just say a few things about what this forum is about. What we're looking to do, the purpose of us getting together, is to look at the broad range of topics related to leadership through the female lens. Now, I don't need to tell you that the external environment is getting tougher. When we were here last year, we were just coming out slowly from COVID, and we were cautiously optimistic that with time, our life will return to normality. Now, what we didn't know is that 2022 would prove even more challenging. So with the war on our border, with the energy crisis that we are all trying to live through, and with the various macroeconomic issues, high inflation, rocketing interest rates, which are really putting a challenge on the way we finance our lives and our investments, things are really difficult. And a personal anecdote. I started work in the UK in late 1980s. My first crisis that I worked through was the early 90s, and my then boss told me that in good times we need good managers, people who can encourage, who can make sure that the business takes advantage of all the great opportunities that are appearing. But in tough times, you really need good leaders. You need people who can help navigate the stormy waters and who can motivate people to act, even though there's lots of uncertainty and adversity. And over the years and over the different economic cycles, I've observed how true those words were. And I'm really looking forward to hearing from the panel and from you in the audience of what your experiences and what your views on leadership in times, in current times is. So, I think we're ready to start our discussion today. Just reminding ourselves that last year when we did our first forum, we very much focused on participation of women and contribution that female leaders made to the growth of our economy. This year we want to take a different look at things. We want to look at different aspects, and given what we've observed over the last few years, so advancement of technology, COVID, lots of remote working, we want to focus on the topic of team connectivity and motivation to act. So those are really the topics that I will be discussing with the panel. But before we do that, let me introduce Aleksandra Tarasińska, who is the editor-in-chief of Forbes Women Poland. Aleksandra promotes women empowerment and is a great advocate for women in business. Ola hosts a weekly podcast for Forbes Women. So Ola, could you please just give us a few words of inspiration for our panel?
Thank you, Olga. Thank you for inviting me here. I'm truly honored to be here with you today. And Olga just mentioned that we will be talking about connectivity, about making people work closely together again after those very tough 2 years. And I was thinking, how can I inspire you? How can I maybe put some different perspective into this topic? And I was thinking that we actually should listen to young generation when we are approaching these problems of how to work together, how to connect again after this long break, and how to make teams be inspired and really be together. So the topic is listen to Gen Z. What is Z generation? Very young people in their 20s, just entering the workforce. And I really want to convince you today that those young people here in Poland and around the globe are not difficult or lazy or entitled. They are simply true to their values, and they are refusing to put up with the toxic work culture that the boomers have created. I don't know if you remember the famous Simon Sinek's TV interview called The Millennial Question. It was viewed on YouTube by millions. And he said that, it was 6 years ago, that millennials as a generation are tough to manage and are having, often are accused of being narcissistic or lazy or unfocused. Millennials. So now we are a couple years later, and we are having another generation entering workforce, Gen Z, and the problems are still the same. So during the pandemic, as Olga said, we started to question and discuss how we work, how we communicate, what it is to be leader, a manager in those turbulent times. And I remember one journalist of The Economist weekly wrote, and this sentence really resonated with me: the modern boss is a cheerleader, not a sergeant major anymore. So during these last 2 years, I have attended numerous conferences, online and in real life, and I have heard many discussions. I read many articles about work from home, hybrid work, flexibility. I've listened a lot of voices about productivity and employees' well-being. I was told that work-life balance will be replaced by work-life blend. And also how flexibility will definitely help and empower women. So here we are today. And I see that some of the corporate CEOs truly believe that greater flexibility is profitable. And many tech companies are very happy to let coders work from home or how they like. Elsewhere, many CEOs are tiptoeing around the question of return, trying to, tempt the staff back to office with cocktail hours and free food. And I've seen it here in Warsaw on Domaniewska Street myself. Finally, we have people like Elon Musk and his famous email to Tesla employees saying simply that they should return to office or resign. The richest man in the world wrote also on Twitter that employees, and I quote, should pretend to work somewhere else. At the same time, and we see it in the research, one of them recent McKinsey survey globally, the big resignation or big quit is still an ongoing trend. So why should we look at the young generation, who they are and what they are telling us? Those young workers born between 1997 and 2012 have come of age at a time when college degrees no longer promise job stability. And they start their career in time of high economic anxiety. Also, they are the first generation for decades when the promise of better future is no longer true. This social contract that if you work hard and you educate yourself, and it will bring you better future and better economical status than your parents, is no longer valid. So these young people also refuse to bend to exploitative and outdated corporate norms. Surveys have found that Gen Zers are less likely than their elders to go along with long hours, overbearing bosses, poor working conditions, or lack of boundaries between personal and professional. A recent National Society of High School Scholars survey in US of 11,000 high school and college-aged people found that Gen Z's higher priorities when choosing an employer are fair treatment of all employees across genders and races, followed by quality of life, employer flexibility, corporate social responsibility. They also more likely to leave jobs first and find employment elsewhere if they don't find their needs satisfied. So why should we listen to them? Firstly, we have no choice. They are the future. Secondly, we all the generations are going through difficult period of change. And the data, for example, from United Kingdom, published recently by FT, shows that yes, we have a rise in sickness absences and unproductive working, a surge in anxiety and ill mental health. Also, there are reports of a sharp increase in remote working. And interestingly, one of the researchers from the survey pointed out foolishness of well-being washing. And he said, you can't yoga your way out of these more structural issues in companies. We must remember that we are seeing, wonders of technology, AI, quantum computing, space industry, but our work cultures, our management and leadership changed very little. So coming to the end, we are today discussing how to reconnect, how to lead and engage talented employees. And I will leave you with a quote about you, about us. In an article from Washington Post published in 1993, titled The Boring 20s, an author was complaining about young people in their 20s in America. I could be counted among them that time. What really distinguishes this generation from those before, it is that it's the first generation in American history to live so well and complain so bitterly about it. This is about us. You know that Financial Times named this year, 2022, the year of the employee. We are wondering what next year, 2023, will bring. And I think we will learn next year. We should learn, we must learn to lead and negotiate and talk to these young people, these Gen Zs. We must, and I hope this will include their point of view, and female leadership are extremely important in this change and this negotiation period. I hope that this great quit we are talking about will at the end become the great renegotiation. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you so much, Alexandra, for that fantastic introduction to our discussion. I think we will go into some of the topics you've mentioned. So let me introduce my panel. And I did say at the beginning that the forum is very much about giving a voice to the female leaders, hence the composition of the panel. And I want to say a very big thank you and a warm welcome to all the male colleagues and participants who are here. And we do invite you to take an active part in our forum. We are aware that those leadership challenges relate to all of us, and we do need to work together to solve them. So let me make some introductions. To my right, Anna Clunes. Anna's a British diplomat who has been the British ambassador to Poland since 2020.
That's right.
And next one is Edyta Jóźwicka, Aneta Jóźwicka, who has recently, I think in September, been elected as our first chairwoman to the British-Polish Chamber of Commerce. So congratulations, Aneta. We're very happy to have you as our chair. And I shouldn't say, but in your spare time, you are the Corporate Relations Director for Northern Europe at Diageo.
Yes.
Super. And Agnieszka Kulikowska, to Aneta's right. Agnieszka is the Senior Partner of Page Executive in Poland. Agnieszka leads the Global Diversity and Inclusion Network at Page. Welcome. On my left, Anna Urbańska, who is our host today at Standard Chartered. Anna is the CEO of Standard Chartered Poland, and we learned today that Standard Chartered now employs 1,200 employees here in Poland. Congratulations on that growth, Anna. And to Anna's left, my old colleague from PwC, Cezary Żelaźnicki. Cezary leads the Polish legal practice, and recently you've also taken on another role. You're leading the whole legal team for PwC in EMEA. Congratulations, Cezary, and wonderful to have you with us. So we will the way it's going to work is we will do 2 rounds of questions, one on the kind of environment, which Alexandra very much talked about. I will ask the panelists how they take on things, and then the second round, more about the approaches, the new leadership styles that hopefully are emerging to fit the new reality. And then we will open up to the audience to ask questions, pass your comments. Okay, so let's start. And the first question is very much about this kind of environment. How, in your experience, and we've got a very diverse representation of different types of organizations. In your experience, what have you seen? How has the world in your workplace changed from before COVID? What you're observing now, and where is it going? And in particular, I think it'd be good to explore some of those kind of advantages that are resulting from this hybrid way of working, but also how some of the challenges that you're seeing. And Anna, if I could put that to you first, and you've got that unique opportunity to give us both the British and the Polish insights. So
great.
Very much looking forward to hearing.
Thank you so much. Thank you for inviting me along. I have the advantage of going first because I think it's a very brilliant panel, and I'm looking forward to hearing from everybody else. But I think sort of to have a reflection on the sort of the general trends and environment, both from life as ambassador to the embassy here in Poland. I work and lead the embassies across the Central Europe region, and also as a civil servant from the UK before that. And I think sort of three kind of quick areas of reflection. Well, the first is that you talked about sort of pre-pandemic and post-pandemic, and it's kind of almost heartbreaking really to think where we were only a year ago as we went into Christmas and Omicron was on the rise, and we were working largely from home. Actually, we feel in a completely different place this year, and I think one of my kind of main reflections about leading here in Poland is that for us at least, this year has not been about pre and post pandemic, it's been pre and post invasion and the aggression of Russia in Ukraine. And actually, I think that one of the things that has given to us in the embassy is a really clear sense of purpose, a really clear sense of determination. I mean, actually a real privilege to be able to bring together what we do at work, what we care about passionately, what we know is the moral and right thing to do. And so if you need, when we think about what does that mean for work, if you think about having this kind of clear sense of purpose and rationale I think that the war has given that to us in spades, and what that has meant for the embassy and for my colleagues is a hugely, I hesitate to use the word positive, but a real sense of determination over the course of the year. Very flexible. We've done hugely amazing things in terms of supporting British nationals to get out of Ukraine and back to the UK, setting up military assistance hubs together with the Polish government, supporting refugees, setting up visa schemes. I mean, these are things that I had never thought we would do in an embassy in a European Union country, but we have. And I think people have basically come back to work because they have seen the value and benefits of it. And so these kind of questions about how do you get people back, it has felt a very organic and very real thing for us in the embassy. Secondly, I wanted to reflect on Ola's points around Gen Z, and again, maybe taking slightly a different comment on it, but the embassy is actually, we are very young. I'm not, but I, we do have many younger staff there, which I think is a really, it's a fantastic addition. But I wanted to share a story actually from my previous role in London. Before I came out here, I worked for the Department of Exiting the European Union, which led the negotiations with the EU on Brexit. And what was really unique about that department was that it was a start-up. It had never been done before, it didn't exist before the referendum, and now it doesn't exist because the negotiations have finished. So we had a kind of a 5-year lifetime as a government department, which is really unusual and probably unique. And one of the things that was unique about that department was our average age. So in contrast to most of the civil service, where the average age is in their 50s, we had an average age of 29. And it was energising. And I really enjoyed working alongside a group of Gen Z. And partly I found it really energising to sort of bust some of the experiences. We sat in part of the Ministry of Defence, a very traditional department. And if you hit the Brexit floor, we had people sitting on the floor with their laptops. And I think it really showed this kind of the way that the younger generation would do whatever it took, wherever it took, to get the work done. And I think that sort of that flexibility, that in-wired flexibility, which actually challenges you as a why didn't I think of that? I had brilliant colleagues who would say, well, I haven't got a meeting till 11 o'clock in the department. So instead of going in on the Northern Line at 8 o'clock in the morning, and if anyone has ever done that,
yes,
you know what I'm talking about. I mean, it's worse than the Japanese metro. But I'll sit at home and I'll sit in Starbucks and I'll clear my emails, and then I'm going to go into work for 11 o'clock. And I mean, why didn't we think of that? I think I totally agree with the philosophy about how do we sort of have that conversation and be able to think about it, because I think there are really genuinely brilliant ideas about how we go work. And then my final quick comment, sorry I could carry on, but is about sort of coming back to the issue that I know that we're not focusing on, but about sort of flexibility in the workplace and women's role in the workplace. And again, I think as we were saying just before the panel started, that if you take a 10, 12-year perspective, we have made huge progress in terms of inclusion and visible diversity in the workplace. The pandemic has set us back in many of those statistics, not back to 10 years ago, but has definitely taken us slightly in the wrong direction. And I think that there are some real positives in there, and there are some real things that we need to work out and manage. I mean, hugely positive in terms of more flexible working and people being able to do their jobs in different ways, but some real caution about what does that mean for for making sure that we reverse this and get back on trend, back on the trends of growth in terms of diversity in our leadership structures. And we know what the case is. The economic, the business case is absolutely there in terms of inclusion at the top level. And I think that does mean a whole set of discussions with our teams. I think it also means thinking about legislation and the way that we set that. And I think there probably needs to be a lot more thinking about the pandemic and the particular implications. I think it was right to raise the sort of mental health issues that are coming through. But I think let's not also forget there are just other areas that we need to keep making steps on. And one of the things that I actually just want to say the word. We had Liz Truss was Foreign Secretary for much of last year until the summer. And I think when she became Foreign Secretary, it was the first time I had ever heard in an all-staff meeting in FCDO with our 15,000 employees around the world, the word menopause uttered by the Foreign Secretary. But I mean, to put it out there, there are still taboos that we have not yet managed to sort of bring into the world of work. And there is work going on by the British Parliament to look at that and making it a protected sort of status at work. So there's more to do.
Fantastic, and I'm sure we'll come back to that. Thank you, Anna. And you talked about how some of those kind of adversities, some of the big external challenges like the war or Brexit earlier, can unite people and make them go that extra mile. But what if we haven't got that around? What in our normal corporate world? Aneta, can I go to you next? And could you share your kind of take on things?
Yes, thank you so much for having me, and thank you so much for Her Excellency for wonderful introduction. Actually, listening to you, I was thinking on how it looked like from my perspective while speaking with businesses in Poland and in UK, but then also within my own company which I work on a daily basis, which is Diageo. So I would say that pandemic has once again reminded us that we people, we are social animals, and people do people do expect to have the same kind of a quality of life like they used to have before the pandemic, and we need to remember that during the pandemic all of these kind of a normal things which we used to enjoy, like meeting friends, celebrating, having together Christmas carols, singing together, enjoying life together, meeting friends for grills, etc., going to universities, etc. We did all of those social interactions face to face. During the pandemic, what we have seen from employer perspective is that actually employees started to expect all of these things to be replaced by the employer, because of course they need to stay home, and especially this younger generation, they expected the employer to secure that they will have a social interactions, that they will have a lovely job, that they will feel the fulfillment within their jobs, that they will do interesting things, plus that the employer will care about themselves, etc. All of this together is, frankly speaking, completely unrealistic expectation. No one can secure everything, right? In one organization, in one workplace. And although many businesses have really created a real step change in securing like Diageo has 24/7 assistance line, managers trainings, support for employees, all kind of things that is in a way the teamwork, the technology has been supporting, etc., etc. But still the expectations were higher from people, especially from these younger generations, Z, as we have heard. What we have also observed within the last period of time, and I do speak not only speaking about the Polish market, but then also looking through lenses of my Northern European markets, is that we have seen that especially younger generation lack the patience in a bit, right? So people used to actually resign, and I do not speak only about this great resignation process, but frankly speaking, if they couldn't find what they were looking for with their current employer, they just quit, right? After a year, after 2 years, etc., or they just express their dissatisfaction, etc. From employer perspective, that was a challenge. Also because, if we are speaking about turbulent times, you need to have a team. First of all, obviously, you need to have a very skillful and talented team, but then also you need to have people along with you who have been navigating through difficult times, through storms, right, as we have been told. But then also a team who has experienced some challenges and work to win throughout those challenges, which hasn't happened so much because people were rather expecting really good times, which is unfortunately nowadays not the case. So I would say like the patience is a bit lacking, but other thing, really positive sign, just which we have spotted as a business, is that businesses really adjusted and really made all of the efforts to make sure that people are treated with respect, that diversity and inclusion is being followed, that people feel the sense and pride in what they do. And I think that was a very positive feature of the pandemic, actually, and what we've been through.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Aneta. Agnieszka, I'll come back to you in a moment.
Sure.
But if I could ask you, Anna, on your experiences, because we were having a chat earlier, and some of it sounded very similar to what Aneta's been saying. What's your take on the new generation, but also how are you seeing the kind of the environment changing, and are you seeing kind of different demands on you as the leader?
Sure. So definitely, I think each new generation is creating a bit of headache for old generation because we need to understand each other. And well, I see differences, and maybe we do not have such a young generation as that at the office, because as I understand, our average is around 30. But definitely what I see, and this is despite pandemic, it is that people are treating work a little bit different than I used to treat work when I was starting, and I think some of my colleagues that are from my generation, because people treat work as work. And recently we had a really nice talent meeting, and extremely talented people were telling me, Anna, work is work, just work. And I think it's quite a fair statement that they name it like that, because work is one of the aspects of their life, important, but this is not 99% of the workload. And I respect it. I have learned it already for a few years, so I am managed by them, but definitely expectations towards the employer are different. And starting from pandemia, because pandemia, what it's changed? It's changed the way we work, so remote, plus it's changed the expectations towards the, as you have mentioned, the employer, but I would say expectations also from the leaders. And when I was looking at the theme of the cover screen, what I have understood is that there are good leaders and there are leaders who simply do not cope with the pace of change, and it's key to understand what are the leadership styles that are required. And I would say there is female or male leadership, there is good and bad leadership, and definitely what I have learned as a leader is that you have to be very much flexible and listen to what people need, because indeed that's our current workforce. People are expecting that, and either you adjust or they will go somewhere else, which is quite cruel from employee perspective, but that's life. And I very much respect current employers because they are very vocal what they want. They are very clear what the expectations are. And they need leaders who will also tell them what are expectations in other way, because work and relations are always two parts, and it's key to understand that. So we have changed a lot in our organization based on the feedback from our people, because indeed we have created, and we are still trying to create, such an atmosphere that will allow them to get the good balance of work fun and life, because it is all three in one, but also to cover that space within the life that was eaten by pandemia. Meaning people are more lonely, people need something from employer that will get them together. So we indeed, maybe yoga is one of the 100 things that we do, but we are trying to organize a platform for cooperation and communication, because as the topic is, people need a platform for communication, and they are extremely intelligent, extremely wise, extremely brilliant, and multi-international, but what I think is they still miss this human touch and the platform for being together. So us as leaders, we try to create this platform for them and also make them aware that maybe this is something they need.
So that's a really interesting point, because I think both Aneta and you have talked about this kind of changing contract between the employer and employee. I mean, certainly when I went to work, I was expecting the work, it was an sort of an implicit contract where, you know, I went to work not just to get paid, but also to, you know, work was providing the intellectual stimulation, it was providing kind of professional growth, social network. I was part of a community that did things together. And had a positive impact on the environment. So there were all these different things that, because of the time spent at work, I expected and I got in my place of employment. But from what you're saying, things are different now, and people can often see that they want to get some of those things from somewhere else, not necessarily from work. So
they definitely have to have the choice.
Yes.
And that is something that is very clear. People need to have a choice, but it's good that it is being provided for them. And for those who are willing to take part, they will take part. If not, no. That's why, for instance, here, and I'll finish, we in Standard Chartered, we try to create very wide range of activities, because people are different and diversity is key here. So we organize everything for different type of interest, type of people within their life. So there is something for singles, something for people who are passionate about some hobbies, something for parents, something for other specific interests that they raise. Because if I would focus just on one, the other will not be included. So I wouldn't feel good, and nobody will feel good. So it must be really spread. But in order to do that, you have to be a leader who understands the people.
Yes.
And that element of connectivity is key, that you know who you deal with, who are your people.
Absolutely. Thank you, Anna. So, Cesare, how are things at PwC, and what are you observing?
Well, at PwC we actually hire over 5,000 people, so of course they are at the very cornerstone of everything that we do. And of course we are aware of the concept of great resignation or of the war for talent, really. But to be honest, I cannot help but feel that the war for talent is very much over. And guess what? Talent won. Whether we like it or not, talent won. And we need to adjust and accommodate to the expectations of the people who are entering our door. And these expectations are very much different to what we have gotten used to seeing even a few years ago, I think. And I think that the workplace today is not only the place where people perform work. Of course, that's a very important part, but people want to have this sort of sense of belonging and sense of purpose. They want to be a part of the company's life, but they also want this company to be a part of the life of society at large, and they expect the employers to take a stand on some of the important topics. And given my inclusion and diversity role, I think, very close to my heart topic, I think people really want to bring their authentic, true self to the organization. They don't want to pretend to be somebody else, just to fit in, just to adjust to the general standard and norm. And I think the months of pandemic, I mean, people are very much tired of these online meetings, online onboardings, online remote celebrations. They are craving for human contact, personal interaction, and we've seen it a lot. I mean, we have such a turnout on some of the events that we arranged for our people, and and I think this will stay. But I also think that there is a more and more interest, I see in PwC tremendous interest in the works of so-called employee resource groups. We have a number of different initiatives. We have a PwC for Women Club supporting our female talent. We have Parents at PwC. We have Shine community supporting LGBT plus community. And I think this will stay. The tendency will probably deepen. I think we will be seeing more and more people rejecting these traditional career models. I don't think everyone will want to be a partner, which probably was the case a lot more in the past. So yeah, I think we live in a very interesting times, but I think the new generation, they are simply smarter than us.
Well, that's an interesting take. Thank you, Cezary. And Agnieszka, let me go to you, because I think at Page, given the work that you're doing with clients, you see probably all of this that you've seen here, but you also have access to some amazing research that you guys do. So
Yeah.
give us that sort of, what you see, and also maybe a bit more global perspective.
Yeah, I can definitely say that we see all of the trends you're mentioning, right? They're diverse the types of trends. We work on a global scale. We're an organization of 8,000 people globally, so we do have quite a lot of data, a lot of observations from other markets. So what I can say, and I will use this phrase quite a lot today, we do see a change, a shift in paradigm. In the sense that we really see that this new generation, and in general the new workplace of the future, it's much more about connection than it was in the past. So I would definitely echo what you were saying in terms of employee resource groups, for example. So in the past, I think we looked more at employees and workers, whereas now we really have to look at people as three-dimensional human beings, and there's no going back. They really expect this. So one would be these ESGs. Other things would be related to diversity and inclusion, or ESG. People, when thinking about changing work, they really look at that. They didn't in the past. So they're looking for organizations that will be aligned with their values. And I'd say this is a big shift. So this is one. Another shift in paradigm would be that, and it's interesting what you were saying, Anna, right? That you see that people kind of focus, they want to focus on work at work. We're seeing more on the global level. We're rather seeing what you were mentioning, Ala, right? So rather a shift from a work-life balance to work-life integration and work-life blend. So people don't compartmentalize as much as they did. They treat these spheres as something that has to blend, right? Has to blend. And we also see another trend. We see corporates entering into areas that were kind of reserved for something very intimate in the past. For example, psychological help. This is something a few years ago we would rather not discuss with our employer at all. It would be something private. Whereas now it's something that corporates are offering to people, and it's very obvious that we should be doing this. And I'd also like to kind of use the microphone, let's say virtual microphone that I have now, to build up on one thing that Anna, you were mentioning. So how the pandemic has impacted different groups in different ways. And maybe just explain that a little, because I think we don't always analyze that, right? So looking at the study done by McKinsey last year, it's actually 1 in 4 women have, because of the pandemic, they have considered resigning from their post or taking on less challenging roles. And why? Because and the lower percentage of men, right? And why is that? Because of the social stereotypes, social norms, that it is women who should take care of children, for example, the elderly, the family during the tough time of the pandemic. The percentage in terms of men has been lower. And I'd like to stress here that I think there are things that we as corporates can do. So I think, and I also think the new generation, they expect this from us. So I think we should, we have the employee resource groups, but I think we should have trainings, and many corporations do, about many topics. We speak about homophobia and why it is wrong. We speak about racism and show the mechanisms that work around racism. I think we should also be vocal as corporates and as organizations speaking about the social stereotypes, unconscious biases, male privilege, white privilege. And I think this is something this new generation expects from us.
Fantastic.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. So we're at the end of round one, and now we're going to try and look at, so what does it all mean for us as leaders? Yeah, how does this environment impacting us, impacting the styles that you're seeing around, what's working, what's not working, what needs to change? And I'll come back to you last, Anna, this time. And I'll start with the other Anna, if I may. So what's your take on this, Anna?
The take on is that I am a leader for many years, and definitely some things are not changing, and it's good. And I think the takeout definitely for me and for my colleagues is that you have to be extremely open and listen. And I think more I listen and more open I am to listen what are the current needs, what are the current trends, because I think we have trends that are coming through the Generation Z or whatever. You need to quickly react, but still the leader is required and expected to make a move, make a change, make the first round, make the first change to the way we act, because then people follow. And we talk a lot about Generation Z, and I have my own Generation Z at home, as my daughter is 23, and for me she's really a testing rabbit. I shouldn't use that word, but this is a testing rabbit. How this new generation is operating and thinking, because although I am not her employer, luckily, but I see exactly how people are, young people, how are they reacting to changes, what are their expectations, but in the end, how lost they are. And of course, naturally, I'm coaching and mentoring her a little bit, but I see she clearly needs a leadership. Because if she has a good leader, and sometimes she has, sometimes she doesn't have, because she's changing her job, she's in this type of her life that she's changing a job, she is more happy or less happy. And then I understand how much leaders are needed, because if she has a leader who shows her and talks to her and treats her like a partner, and I think this is very important, that she is being treated as a partner, and then she's very much engaged, she's making extra things for work because she truly believes in the effort she's making. So even the times are changing and everything is changing, still the good leaders is required. And the good leader is, as I repeat, somebody who listens, but then somebody who reacts and acts. It helps.
And you make a fantastic point, Anna, because I observed that over the last 10 or so years, we kind of trained leaders to speak, to project, to present. When you went to a communication training, it was very much about what you said. And I think what we really need right now is the training and the ability to listen and make sense of it.
The ratio has changed. Previously, people were listening.
Yes.
Right now, they are talking.
Yes.
And I think that has changed. Leaders has to listen. When people are talking, no issues. Yes, I feel you have no problems with people talking. They are very clearly expressing their expectations, their view, their opinions. They need somebody who would listen and treat them as partner.
Treat them as partner, and that cheerleader, as opposed to sergeant major. I think that's a great sort of phrase to remember. Thank you, Agnieszka. Maybe you next.
Yes, yes. So as I said, shifts in paradigm, and this is exactly what you started saying, Anna. So I think the style of management is evolving, is changing from something that I would call directive towards something much more compassionate. So exactly, you're reflecting your thoughts. We do see this to connect with, in general, not only the new generation, but I think to be able to connect across these generations that we have at work, you have to just be this kind of new leader. So numerous studies show that. Then what we see shifting is that the approach of the past was rather to look at kind of people only as groups, so have this kind of collective approach to people, whereas now you have to look at the individual even more. I can just quote a small example that we've implemented as a company in our ranks now in Poland, in a few countries, So we have asked people to undergo something called the Gallup assessment. I'm sure some of you know it, but I'm not sure if everyone. So it's an online assessment where people can see what kind of natural talents they have, ranked in 32, let's say, different strengths. And then what we want to do, we want to work with people on these individual strengths to strengthen their core strengths rather than always focus on the things they're not doing perfectly, like it was in the past. And again, I'm speaking about this because I think it's quite universal. So we have seen quite a lot of companies adopt this approach. Then I'd say that something that is changing not only I'd say in relation to leadership, but I think it's also core, is the role of the office. So if as leaders we want to be able to attract people to come to the office at all, we have to understand that the role of the office has changed. It's no longer just a place where we come to work. It's actually a place where we, if we will come at all, if we're given a choice, of course, we will come for connection. So this is, I think, it's changing the layouts of offices. It's changing and it really has a lot of impact on the way we manage people to again attract them to come to the office. So I'm not sure how it has worked for your organizations, but this has been a challenge for many, and is a challenge for many of our clients. We recruit again globally in many markets, so this coming back to office aspect is quite difficult. And then I'd say the shift in paradigm is also to well-being. Well-being was not something, let's say, really discussed in years prior. Maybe companies offered like gym cards. This was something typical. Whereas now, as you were all mentioning, your companies are offering that. It's psychological support. There are various things, right, that companies offer. What we also did, for example, on the local level, we had a series of excellent webinars with Daria Abramovich, who is the psychologist trainer of Iga Świątek, so our top and the world's top tennis player, on a number of topics, right, from meditation through well-being to work-life integration, how to be mindful. So and again, this is just an example that we're doing, but I'm sure many organizations that you represent are doing the same, and we do see this in the global trends that we are analyzing.
Super, and Agnieszka, what really caught me in what you said was that certainly the theme, I think, in the past was to recognize people's strengths, but very much the focus was on helping them bring up their sort of, we call them development needs, and
yeah.
You spend a lot of time talking to people about how they could work on those development needs. So my understanding is that now, of course, they need to be conscious of where their development needs are, but actually what we're doing as leaders is focusing very much on helping people make the most out of their unique strengths.
Out of their unique strengths, yes, and maybe I'd add one thing to that. So in the past we talked a lot, and we still do, about, for example, equality. But I think much more now we speak about equity, which I think is more fair. And just to explain the concept, so equality would be giving the same to everyone, and equity is actually giving different things to everyone to try to achieve the same result, because all people have different backgrounds. They might have had different circumstances. So me, again, as you mentioned, diversity, equity, and inclusion lead in Page Executive globally, I speak to clients about this. We speak a lot about how to build diversity on board levels among our clients globally. And again, this equity approach is very important here.
Super point. Thank you so much. Cezary, do you want to go next?
I agree with everything that's been said, and I'm not sure I can bring something new, but I think we definitely need to work on the change of mindset of the leaders, basically to help them get the best out of their employees, out of their teams, and listening to the employees is absolutely essential. We used to run in PwC annual survey amongst our employees every year. And right now we are doing it every 3 months. And we do it in a graduated way with each team leader and his little team. We are trying to understand where the problems are and what can be done for the firm and for the people to address these problems. So I think definitely changing mindset and there is a terrible cost of pandemic and it's unmeasurable, but it accelerated certain tendencies, and first of all, it accommodated greater flexibility, and this flexibility, I think, is the key, because it actually allows people to fulfill their professional aspirations and focus on other needs, for example, parenting. And I really hope that we live in the world where we can actually have it all. We can get this sort of model, but this is a very, very complicated act, and it will require from leaders to change their approach.
Yes, it's that work-life blend
Yeah.
that was mentioned here a number of times, that really does require readjustment. Thank you, Cezary. Aneta.
Thank you. Well, I couldn't agree more with all of what you said, but I would say that if we look at the future probably, or if we try to look a bit towards the next years, I would say there are three factors that most probably will influence on how leaders should behave and how they should attract talents, etc. First of all is the marketplace. Well, we can see that markets are becoming more and more complicated, unpredicted. From the economic perspective, actually, we sometimes, although being, of course, very well equipped with all kind of analysis, forecasts, modeling, econometric analysis, etc., we still don't know how the market will behave and how our customers will react, how our consumers will react in a month time, not to mention the year time or 3 years perspective, etc. If we add to this that in many organizations we work in a matrix organizations and we work from a distance, right? We do not even meet our teams on a daily basis. It requires from leaders to empower people and to have a trust in them. So simply said, the decision-making process cannot stay anymore only with leaders, right? Actually, everyone is expected to take the decision. Everyone is expected to observe what is happening on the marketplace, and then to, of course, embed in line with company policies and in line with the strategy, but to embed the solutions and then to really decide themselves. So this kind of a trust presented by leaders, I think it will be very, very important. The second factor is technology development and the pace of the communication. What we have seen throughout last years is that people do expect, I would say, live conversation with the manager, with their leaders. They do expect immediate decisions. If they do not get the immediate decisions, of course they do approach you with, all kind of communicators, right? With emails, WhatsApp, Teams, etc. Usually, I'm receiving sometimes multiple messages like, what about this thing, etc. So you cannot actually anymore keep them waiting, and therefore I'm coming back to this empowerment thing, but then also this pace of the communication has really accelerated throughout the years, and I think we should expect it even more. So again, they do expect a kind of a live conversation. And last but not least, I would say the expectations of employees, which you all mentioned already, but I would add one more thing. The expectation is also of people to feel the pride in the employer, in the company which they are working for, and that the company is not only delivering goods or services, which they are proud of, but also that they can contribute to the society. And of course, here we come back to ESG, and people do expect, for instance, the support for refugees. They do expect companies to behave well, to support diversity and inclusion, to do some good social activations, and overall, they would like to be included, and they would like to do something more, really, just to feel that the job makes sense, not only from the perspective of being able to pay their rent, but then also to contribute to some greater cause.
Fantastic. So the expectation is that as part of this business, I am a force for good. Yeah, that's very much what the expectation is. And I really like what you said about trust and empowerment, that in this very fast-paced world, you can't just, all the decisions cannot be floating to the top,
No.
to the sergeant major.
Not anymore.
Not anymore. People need to be empowered and feel comfortable about making some decisions. That also means that organizations need to be prepared to deal with people getting it wrong.
Yeah,
Because in this uncertain world that you talked about, we can't really predict. We don't know what inflation is going to be like. We don't know, how our customers are going to behave. So there may be some wrong calls. And I think our organizations and leaders need to be much more accommodating of this learning through doing and not always getting it 100% right. And I promised you the last word.
Sure. Making notes, because it's so fascinating to hear from others. I suppose a few kind of reflections on which I think endorse what others have said. The first one, building on your point about sort of empowerment, is that actually this idea that you have sort of leaders and employees, that is not what it's like. This puts so much emphasis on everyone in organisations being in leadership roles, this kind of blurring of leadership and management, and of course there's something about the senior levels in setting a culture and trying to create that culture, but actually what we're talking about is human interactions between people all the way through the organisation, and I think that's one of my for many years actually I've had this sort of be human at work, be a member of the human race. When I employ people, we look for people who are members of the human race. But to try and illustrate that a little bit is that I think that what was a leadership person I was listening to this year who was talking about us sort of leaving our human values at the door of the organisation, then coming in and being our work selves. And actually that doesn't really work anymore. And I think about, we've talked about these conversations, people are real, we all have challenges, everyone's coming to work to try and do their best, we all have lives outside, and actually being able to have conversations that really sort of embrace that feels to me like this huge shift that we are all making and need to make and should be making and need to do more of, because actually we're all members of the human race and we all need this kind of, these words around being recognised as our whole selves. When I'm, one of the things I do most days is send a text message to the ambassador in Kiev, who, they're having a tough time over there, guys. But that's not because I think it's the right thing to do or that I have a line management responsibility for it. It's because I actually care whether she's okay. And so I guess that's part of my sort of reflection is around, being really authentic means that you need to recognise that your employees have feelings about what they're doing. When we're asking them to do this stuff, they might think it's a fantastic idea, they might think it's a dreadful idea. It doesn't matter, they're still going to do it. But sort of being able to have a much richer conversation, and that's okay. Not only is it okay to have that, but actually it becomes really important. My second reflection is around this point around being able to feel and be your, I think you were saying it, Cesare, about being your whole self at work. And I think there's still this big role for us as leaders of organisations to create a very open environment, which is enabling people to sort of, again, break these taboos and bringing themselves in. And we've been having a series of what I've called conversations across the Central Europe region, just taking literally any aspect of sort of life and bringing it, and we've had from transgender colleagues and LGBT colleagues and colleagues with ADHD and women and you name it, we've had a conversation about disability, but not only about us as an organisation, but actually us as an organisation trying to achieve things. And not only how is that for people who are working for us, but as an organisation, have we thought about that in terms of what we're trying to achieve in the countries that we are operating in? And how do we not only make sure that we're a great employer of disabled people, but actually are we talking to disabled people? We're an organisation that should be reaching in a very diverse, as embassies, it's all about who we're talking to out there to understand the countries we're in. And so by trying to do a bit in the huge generosity that I would say. I mean, I'm so grateful to my colleagues in the organisation for bringing themselves into work and putting themselves out and being vulnerable, because it actually is not only helping us to be better as employers, but it's also helping us do our role better out in the world. So let me stop there. But I mean, it's hugely helpful to hear this conversation.
Brilliant, and you know, when you said being a member of the human race, it actually sort of made, and being authentic, a lot of what came out here was about that authenticity and being ourselves at work. Because, quite frankly, in this blended workplace, you know, with no time to take the work, to put the work uniform on and to take it off, you know, we just have to be ourselves. And I think that. Us women who are, you know, at this leadership table looking at from a very historical perspective, we're relatively new to this table. And I think it's very much on us to actually set that different tone and set that different direction. And I think that's precisely what we've been hearing here in the panel. So maybe I'll just close this part of the session with my personal definition of leadership. That leadership is about mobilizing people and creating an environment for collective action that brings positive results. And I think we've heard many different examples of that. So we all warmed up now, and we're ready for your questions and your comments, and we'd love to hear your stories. So as you're speaking, could you please, because people on the camera will not be able to see you, so maybe you could just introduce yourself and then make a comment, ask your question. Yes, please, lady at the back.
Good morning, I'm Anna Dobrowska-Wardyński and Partners. Thank you very much for this very interesting discussion. And like all of you, I agree with everything that was said, and it's very interesting. Maybe this is not so much as a question, but a comment, and maybe you could let me know what you think. On the one hand, we're dealing with the Gen Zs, and that's absolutely understandable. On the other hand, as Annette, I think you said, you know, the fast pace of today's life, the market, the client's expectations, how do you match and blend this part of our life? So, you know, the willingness to slow down and not to, you know, take the, you know, the lifestyle of the boomers versus the ever-growing expectations of our clients to be there at every moment, you know, and every part, you know, to be there immediately and to respond immediately. What do you think?
Fantastic, thank you, Anna, for that question. So, who would like to?
Okay, I can. So again, from the recruitment company's perspective, right? We recruit 100,000 people per year, globally. So I think there is no kind of going back. I mean, the culture is changing. The paradigm has shifted. So the clients, they have to start understanding that this paradigm has shifted. Because of course there will be kind of pearls of the old type, so people who will be still wanting to invest as long hours as they did before, but the majority of this new generation will be different. So we'll have to engage them in different ways. We'll have to find the connection with them. So this is my view, but based on discussions I have had with colleagues and market data we are seeing. And again, this is because the paradigm is shifting in our sphere, I'd say in the Western sphere. This does not necessarily mean that this is the same everywhere in the world, right? So there are still, I'd say, markets which are extremely competitive, like the Asian market, where we would have people in India who will be working long hours. They'll be working shifts free. They will be working in free shifts per night. They'll have work organized in free shifts to be able to cover around the clock, and they will be working as people did in the past. But I think in our sphere this is really changing.
Thank you, Agnieszka. Maybe Cesare, could I ask you, from a lawyer to a lawyer and a member of the professional services, how do you manage those expectations of clients who expect everything done yesterday?
I mean, so the clients do expect everything done yesterday. That hasn't changed. We are slowly educating them that this, there is a way we can deliver our service offering, but the expectation is still there. And I think here in Poland, we are still not, the concept of great resignation has not quite reached us to the same level. I recently had a call with General Counsel of the global corporation, and she said, Cezary, I want you to find me some Polish lawyers, because your Polish lawyers are way better than the one that I have in Switzerland. And maybe this is obviously a generalization, but I think that we still have this culture of high performance, delivering everything when needed. But I think the responsibility of the leader is to set up the conditions of collaboration with the client in such a way that it is not going to overload our people, because we can easily lose them, and we will have to be a lot smarter using or sort of providing services to our clients, making sure that we do not run off our people.
Yes, absolutely, and I remember that all the client deadlines used to be 2nd of January. So that was a very challenging time. So hopefully that's changing now, and I think it's very much about how do you create the right environment so that the client needs are met, and also you've got people at work who can actually have a proper life and enjoy spending time with family.
Olga, could I just
yes,
add one more comment to that, right? Because I was talking more globally, right? Because if we look at Poland, yes, and I totally agree with you. The fact we have 400,000 people working global business services centers in Poland, like people here in this building for Standard Chartered, and this is. It didn't come out of thin air. It's because also we still have this work ethic in Poland where we want to show that at least we're at least as good as our colleagues in the West. So I think this would be one. Of course, we have highly educated people who know languages. So yes, we're seeing loads of corporates saying things like you're saying, right? Let's recruit lawyers here, procurement professionals. Let's recruit our cyber talent like you are, or marketing, because again, we still have this work ethic in general, right? But then as a generational, I think the new generation will be a bit different. But yes, still, we're the market leader worldwide. We're the #1 location in Europe, the #3 location worldwide in global business services because of the work ethic.
Yes, and you mentioned, Agnieszka, before we started the panel, that how many? Over 300,000?
400,000 we now have, and the prediction is over the next 2 years, it will be another 100,000 people. And I think this is always worthwhile to speak on camera about this, because not everyone knows about this, and this should be one of our main export products in Poland, that we are so good in this. We have so many companies from all over the world already having centralized processes here.
So we're looking at potentially 500,000 people working in this industry globally, based here in Poland, but really contributing to the global business.
To EMEA projects, to global projects, exactly.
Super. Thank you. Yes, please.
Okay. Paweł Milicki, I'm organization consultant and mediator. I have a short question, but first a very short introduction to that, if you allow.
Please.
We are attending a conference on, as it says, female leadership. I'm unaware of any conferences on blue-eyed leadership or brown-eyed leadership. Some 80, 90 years ago, this was a dimension that was considered in some countries in Europe with growing fascism as important, determining your job opportunities and possibly and dramatically your whole future, as we all know.
Yes.
So somehow today we, attending the conference, showed that we consider the dimension of being male, female still important somehow and contributing differently to our leadership abilities, skills, and so on. So my question is, we talked a lot about human race on the one hand, but also the new generation having to some degree different values. Do you think that in some 20 years from now, we'll still need the conferences on male-female leaderships, or this dimension will be just removed as being irrelevant to the subject of being a leader?
Great question.
A tough question, possibly, but...
I think we all know what we hope for, but let me give
if you don't mind, I can go first, because it's somehow easier for me to answer, but I would really very much like that we did not have such conference in 20 years' time on the topic, but at the time we do, because I mean we still have so many obstacles to combine the professional life with parenting. The reality is the burden of being a parent is very often on the female side. We don't have as spread of a concept of shared parental leave. We are introducing that in PwC, but this is not something common. And until we have these measures in place, until we reduce the gender pay gap, and until we ensure the parity, relative parity on the boards, I think we need to have such conferences.
I still know very many men who would hate to have a female leader above them as superior.
Yes.
It's just openly said.
Yeah.
A woman in charge of, forget it.
If I can also,
Yes,
As often
it is.
it sounds.
Thank you for raising that, because I think it's one of
It's
those
very profound,
unsaid
I know.
things. Yes.
if I can also address this, because I, working for so many years, and actually with many cultures all over the Europe, I have seen, unfortunately, although throughout the years it has been changing. I mean, more and more women joining the boards, etc., and professional forums. But still, I have seen majority of male leadership, frankly speaking. That's the reality as we are facing, not only in Poland, but all over the places in Europe. And I would also like to say that no matter if we like it or not, there is a difference in how, in some professional features or capabilities which are demonstrated by women and men. Both are very good, actually, and very much contributing to the business growth. However, we just do business differently a bit. We do react differently. We do interact with people differently, and then I think the biggest value of a great team is the diversity. Actually, to have both women and men, younger generation, older generation, people from different races, and what I have seen within working with Diageo for so many years, but then also working with and speaking with colleagues from more businesses, is that the greatest teams are the diverse teams, and the greatest projects which are being delivered and the most innovative projects being delivered are being delivered by teams who are really diverse. So simply said, this blend of various experiences, various perspectives, various professional backgrounds, etc., etc. People just contribute to each other and create something completely new. Because as they say, like I think in your industry that must be also the thing. If we are to employ one more person who is the same or very similar to this group, I mean we don't need that person, because we have that person already, right? So we need to really have somebody who is adding something else and something completely different, just to create one picture out of all of these puzzles.
Super. Please.
Can I do a bit? I mean, I think first of all, to address the point you were making about brown and blue, I mean, we have to use the law to help us on this, about sort of what is legislated for in terms of groups that need it is relevant to distinguish. And I think I just think that starts with UN legislation and human rights legislation and so on. So that would be one thing I would say. I mean, the other is a sort of a kind of reflection on. I mean, in a way, by talking about female leadership, we're sort of doing this massive generalisation about 50% of the population. And I agree with Cesare about, it is still this issue about sort of society and expectations. And I think I would put myself in your 1/4 of women who've thought about giving it all up because it just becomes too challenging. So, I mean, I think there is something real that we need to, and hopefully we can help address. But I wanted to make a different comment, really, about how we all identify ourselves as individuals. And I remember attending a board meeting at the Foreign Office about 5 or 6 years ago, when we were talking about diversity and inclusion and the fact that we did not have, we really needed to make a shift in terms of women in senior positions. And it was quite an important meeting, because I remember I was there on behalf of, as a sort of an external voice. I wasn't on the board, but I was there to talk about my reflections on it. And one of the things I went into that meeting to say is, like, I've had enough. We're now angry. you can't keep telling us that as women we're not as good, you know, which the feedback I've got, you're not, you know, you're not as good as your male counterparts. You know, let's stop that argument. We now have to understand that there is something that is, you know, we have to overcome that, and out of the meeting, we got a commitment that we would try and address it within a 4-year posting cycle, and had some success. But the final thing that I wanted to say about that meeting was that I found it really fascinating. So we had a board sitting around the table, and there were some women in it, and there were but the vast majority of men. But as we were talking about diversity and inclusion, every person, men as well as women, stood up and said, essentially, I am different in my own way, and what about my group of people? So somebody said, you know, what about people who've got mental health issues? Somebody else said, what about people who are introverts and not extroverts? Somebody else said, I'm a legal professional in an organisation full of diplomats. What about people like me who've got specialist skills, but not the main skills of the organisation? And what I found very interesting was that each person around that table basically stood up and said, I feel like a bit of an imposter here, and I feel a bit different, and what about me? And I say that because I think it gives us all a real challenge, which is actually we do all approach this as individuals. And whether you're a woman, or you're a woman lawyer, or you're a woman lawyer with children with mental health issues, whatever your version of it is, actually the really important point is that you know, how do you create an environment where everyone feels they belong, and that they are part of the organisation? And I think my reflection, I don't know, but it's kind of tough in an organisation with a massive history. You know, you sit in the Foreign Office, it's been going for 500 years, and it's a very traditional building. You know, so it's quite hard to feel that you're it. But I think that's one of the challenges as leaders.
And sorry, can I just, Agnieszka, just a bit, because as someone who has led very diverse teams, I can also say that it's a really tough job, because you get a team of diverse people, and as you say, Anna, everyone comes to that table with a different perspective. And to actually get the benefit of that diversity, you have to make that diversity come to life. You cannot be then the sergeant major who dictates everything. And that really takes time. And in today's fast-paced, as we said a number of times, world, you know, leaders really have to take time and make space to make that diversity work. Sorry, Agnieszka.
Yeah, may I just comment on that? You know, basing on what you said, on what everyone said now. So as you were saying, Anna, that is called intersectionality. So when you have people who have, all of us have specific characteristics, and sometimes they kind of pile up. So I can tell you, as a woman, I may face specific biases. As a lesbian, I face other ones. When they compound, it's both on the sexual orientation front and on the gender part, right? So the work I do, for example, being on the board of Campaign Against Homophobia, is to make people aware, right, of the type of biases we have to face in society. But I wanted to perhaps end, at least what I'm saying, I'd like to end it with a nice quote, or maybe a paraphrase of a meme you probably might have seen on the internet about diversity. I really like this meme, which says that diversity is getting invited to the party or going to a party, but inclusion is actually having fun at the party and dancing until the very morning, you know? So in this, I think this is our role as leaders. So if there is a role that leaders, you know, I agree, leaders, you know, it's kind of merging leaders and employees and so on, but I think our role as leaders is to enhance this kind of diversity understood in this way, so that everyone feels welcome, feels they have a voice, and then, you know, the better results, business results come, as we have seen in studies done by McKinsey. The most diverse boards, they actually achieve results up to 36% better than non-diverse boards.
Super. I'd like to just go to Ola before we leave this topic, because before we started, you quoted some really interesting statistics about the share of voice, Ola.
Yeah.
Could you just...
We are not very optimistic, actually, but we are measuring, I come from a media company, and we decided as Forbes Women to look at the gender equality in media, in Polish media, and every year, at the end of the year, with the help of Institute of Instytut Monitorowania Mediów, Media Monitoring Institute in Warsaw, we are checking out the balance of voices of experts in major news outlets, in TV news outlets. So 4 major biggest TVs with bigger reach, 6 million viewers a month. So it's really having an impact on what Polish people see and what people know and what people think. And we saw some progress, very slow progress. We are talking about equal voice, and we have initiatives inside our companies, and we are reaching out to our colleagues in different media brands. But what happened last year is actually we are going backwards. And this in this last issue, December issue, we published the results, and the results are really saddening because we came from 24% of women experts in major TVs. News in TVs to 21 this year. So I talked to experts, and they tried to explain it with the war going on, and the news focused on army, on international affairs, and military and security, where experts tend to be traditionally male. But I don't think it's the right answer. I think we are just not paying attention as an organization, and actually we are having it internally and externally. And coming to your provocative question, I understand it. The answer is, to me, in numbers. I mean, numbers are objective. According to UN Global Gender Report, we also have this backward trend during the pandemic. Before the pandemic, here in Central Eastern Europe, we had 107 years to get the equality on all levels. Now we have more than 130 to achieve equality on economic, political, health, and other educational fields, how it's measured. So we are really not there yet. And the same question I got all the time why I'm publishing Forbes Women and not Forbes. I really don't want to publish it anymore, but I hope we will stop someday. But until it's needed, we have to do it to enlarge female perspective on economy and in business. That's the answer.
Thank you. Yes, please.
Sorry, just to carry on with this topic before, in case we're going to move off to something else. Barbara Stachowiak-Kowalska, I'm an honorary member of the British Chamber and the board member of the Irish Chamber.
Great to have you with us, Masha.
Thank you. You know, we obviously, following on from all our discussions and the need whether we have this distinction for females over males or whatever, you know, if we think back to just 2 years ago, Black Lives Matter, you know, there was so much, there was a horrible backlash of people sort of saying, you know, what about the blue-eyed
White Lives
Matters, you know, and all that crap, if you'll excuse my expression. But, you know, to heighten awareness, sometimes you need a mass event like that, a major, you know, global movement to sort of remind people that the struggle for, you know, for minorities is not over. I mean, how many years is it since, you know, emancipation of women, you know, that we think about America being this, you know, multicultural society, and not only America, where there's still prejudice. So, you know, I think there is probably still a need, sadly, for this distinction between, you know, to try to ensure that women are represented, and obviously all other minorities. And there's a question whether they are minorities, you know, that's another issue. I think last week, I didn't check the statistics or the news, but I think the EU legislated for some quota for women being represented on boards. So, you know, whether that, that maybe we can talk about whether that's a good thing or not, because again, I know lots of women are, you know, worried about the quotas and whether there should be a quota rather than people being represented on boards due to their competence, of course. Another thing I want to mention is I saw a documentary, about a month ago as part of the Warsaw Film Festival, and I think it was called Dragon Women, about women in finance. And it was, you know, fantastic. If it's on general release or available on the internet, I encourage everyone to watch it, because the women were so honest about their struggles. But it was quite sad listening to this morning, listening to, you know, the trend that we have to embrace regarding more flexible time and the blend of work-life balance, because I could see these women, all these women who were very senior in the financial sector, had to make such enormous sacrifices in order to be accepted. And I wonder whether, going forward, if women leaders are trying to make these changes within their organisation, how male colleagues who are actually going to be supporting their nomination, you know, how acceptable that will be, and whether some of those necessary changes are going to be regarded as weakness, or because they're women, you know. So anyway, lots of
things. Yes, please, Agnieszka.
Yeah, okay, just because, you know, when I hear quotas or targets, I just like to mention that I know they're also, you know, I know their broad views probably even here in relation to that topic. I absolutely and firmly believe that targets are, well, necessary because as Ola said, you know, it was 107 years, now we move back to 130. Change is not going to happen without incentive of itself. I also think we sometimes tend to look, you know, that women will be promoted because they're women. I'd rather say many men who are there in these roles, they were promoted because they're men in the sense, again, this is just a, you know, a mental shortcut I'm making, because we evaluate men on their professional achievements. Whereas when looking at women, we look at the woman in the professional context, but we also tend to analyze her family situation, whether she will want to have kids, how will that impact her ability to perform. That's why I think we're hiring many men for, you know, being men. And I think quotas have shown, and again, this is also a report we're now compiling, my company, looking at all the markets in Europe where targets have already been introduced before this new EU law that is going to come into force now. Everywhere where these targets were introduced, the amount of women increased. And like to people who say that, you know, we will be just promoting because of the gender, I'd say there's so many talented women, there are excellent women in the organizations and externally, that for me that argument doesn't really, it's not a good argument. You just have to find the right women. It's like Ola said, there's so many women, like you created this Baza Expertek, like the database of experts that media can use, and they're not using, and we still have 21% only of women in, you know, the major TV networks. So I'd say the women are there. Let's kind of connect with them.
Yes, absolutely.
Thank you.
Anna, you wanted to say something.
Yes, for diversity, I think answering your question, yes, I think we are going to have in 20 years such events, looking even at the timeline. Mm-hmm. But I think for two reasons. I think this gender diversity, which I thought is the easiest one to be solved, seems not to be so easy. But apart from that, we have any other areas that we can focus, that's aging. I think this is something what older I am starts to be more and more important and visible, and I can just imagine how difficult it will be to implement it. For women, I think there are two challenges. First of all, I see less and less women willing to take more leadership roles, and when I talk to the younger generations, leadership is one of the options they have. I think people like to go towards the subject matter experts roles, where also they have the nice career growth, but they are not so much on the spot. They do not need to fight for exactly the percentages and other things. And I don't know if it will look so good in a few years if we do not show them by role example that this is not really a fight for your life. This is a pleasure you have to have from being a leader. And those female leaders who are having the pleasure should be very vocal that this is possible and it's not such a sacrifice. And I think many of us who have other aspects of life being feel like hobbies or parenthoods or husbands or any other areas that we are successful, that it is possible to have a career plus. And it can be managed. And I think for quotas, I don't know. What my worry is that women will be chosen for the sake of being within the quota, and they will not be respected and listened for their choice. So that's why I would prefer that it goes naturally. Looking at my organization, we have more women than men, which I start to take a look. Why is it so on the senior leadership position? Because I think it really depends who is choosing. And I think the best approach for me, the kind of phased one, is to have for sure women as in the voting panel for choosing the leaders. And if they are there, women have more chances to be chosen because it's more agnostic. But for quotas, my worry would be that women may be chosen just to fit to the quota, and then they will not be respected, which would kill all the story for the success of such a solution.
I think there will be enough women. They'll have find a platform and a voice. If it's just one woman, I think that is difficult. That's why I think it's amazing that you have such organizations. We have such organizations like yourselves in Poland. We also on our board here in Poland we have 36% women, which is great. But others are not so fortunate. So to get this one woman, two women, up there, sometimes I think we just need this extra push. Let me end there. It's a topic I'm really passionate about.
And I would like to bring that dimension of leadership that Anna talked about, because we've been talking about leadership as a role, as a position, whereas I think what and Aneta, you mentioned that actually leadership is about stepping up, accepting the challenge, regardless of where you are in the hierarchy, because the external environment demands that. So what we've seen some great leadership in Poland with the war. People literally just got together. They didn't wait to be appointed. They didn't wait for the title. We all just got on with it. And I think more and more in a workplace we're seeing the need for that. And it's back to that trust and empowerment, Aneta, you talked about. I think it's really, really important. More questions, comments? Yes, please.
I'm responsible for corporate consulting, part of which is a workplace transformation. So I couldn't agree more with every observation that you have mentioned so far. The question that comes to my mind is, what do you think about being ready from the business point of view to really culturally transform? What I think, we would agree that culturally, privately, we are at a different stage now. Yes, people culturally transformed, but some say that organizations, business is like a castle. Yes, we talk a lot, but we are not really ready to transform. What do you think about that? And do you think that Polish corporate world is a little bit less maybe ready to implement those changes than, for example, in England or in Western Europe? Because that's also something that is connected with a leadership style or mentality, and it's just a question.
Super question. Thank you for that, because I think you're right that it all sort of sounds really good when we're in panels, when we talk individually about what we're doing, how the leadership styles are changing, but then very often we get back to our offices, back to our business, and it's business as usual, same old, and changing that is not easy. So what are the panel's views on that? Are we kind of living in two parallel worlds where yes, we know that it needs to change, but at the same time, is it really changing? And are we making those transformations that Małgorzata referred to?
I'm happy to share some thoughts. Yeah, again, from our perspective as a recruitment firm, I'd say I think corporates, the international corporates, are in a different situation than Polish one. But international, I mean, most of us work in international organizations, right? So we do have our headquarters abroad. I think the headquarter has been driving the West, the so-called West will be the US, Europe, has been driving a lot of the transformational cultural changes. I think without these Western organizations in Poland, we would be in a totally different, we will have a totally different society, totally different corporate culture than we currently have. we can look at other countries more to the east, and they still have a different working culture. So I think the big push has come from the West, and I think the West has helped us transform. We know that there are a lot of also even big Polish organizations. I mean, big organizations. Well, some of them actually managed in a partnership model that I think would have probably the resemblance of both the types of mindsets. So more the traditional, let's say, Polish one and the more Western one. But I also think this is evolving and changing. But then if we look at kind of corporations that were homegrown here, I'd say some of them might be a bit more patriarchal. They might have this more, directive management style rather than empowering management style, and the one focused on connection. So I'd say I believe there are a bit of two realities. We're still, the owners of Polish companies. They really they focus on results. They focus on profit rather than moving to the model where you focus on profit but also on people and planet, which is this new paradigm, right, of ESG. But again, in Poland, in the corporates, I think we are transforming. We're making the shift.
If I can, I was thinking about this question, and I think what is happening, and indeed I can talk only about the Western type of businesses because those are the usual I worked with. I think people are transforming organizations rather than organizations are transforming people, and the organization that want to keep the talent, and nobody likes to lose them, need to adjust as quickly as possible to go to the current trends and expectations. And I think historically, I was seeing for the big transformation shifts coming from the top. I think it's happening completely different right now. So we have to adjust to the current needs of what people need, what people want, and I very often adjust to my way of thinking and approach to what is really needed by people. And I try to find logic, and usually there is logic within that, and I need to adjust all the organization to that. So I think those who want to survive will have to.
And Cezary, can I ask you, because you work both with traditionally Polish clients and also with the international community, so what would your answer be to this?
I think we are all transforming, and we all also realize that transformation will not happen from one day to the next. It's a process. It requires a lot of stages of engagements. We need to address a number of issues. The way we approach the transformation in PwC around inclusion and diversity, that is, again, a topic very close to my heart. I mean, we have a proper strategy in place. We focus on several pillars of this transformation, starting with education, starting with some behaviors at onboarding for our staff, some do's and don'ts. Even at the recruitment level, we are trying to make sure that we address inclusion and diversity as a key priority for us. That also is reflected in assessment panels. This is reflected in mentoring opportunities for female talent. We do see, I mean, the topic of targets, and I mean, I can talk about it quite a long time, but the reality is that last couple of years, I mean, we were really privileged to have you, Olga, in charge, and we're having such a strong female leader for quite some time made us kind of sleepy, and we didn't realize that along the way we lost a lot of female partners. Our numbers dropped down, and we are trying to re-establish, and I think we are at the level where targets might be needed. So there is a number of different issues to consider and to implement, but for as long as there is the right direction, this transformation will happen. It will just take a little time, but we will definitely get there.
Thank you. So I've just noticed that time flies when you're having a really interesting conversation. So I think we have time for one last question or comment from the room, if there is one. If there isn't one, I
would like to,
yes.
But if I don't want to take the floor too much.
We'll give the floor to you, sir.
Thank you. I did for many years research at universities on intergroup relations. So prejudice, discrimination, in-group favoritism, whatever you call it, was the subject of my research. And I realized at some moment there is one crucial thing to know about and to be concerned with as parents, teachers, and leaders. That we, because this is the background of all negative behavior in this sense, we're all different. And the point is whether we associate being different with being better or worse. In other words, scientifically speaking, it's about whether we use in the way we perceive, describe, and predict the world around using dimensions, and they are perpendicular, allowing for being male, female, and good and bad, or they are intercorrelated, which means if you're female, you are too emotional to cope with the crisis situations. Okay? A typical stereotype I would hear from men. So as parents and teachers and leaders, we should teach people around that being different does not imply in no way being better or worse.
Yes. Very good
Agreed.
point.